talking about J.K. Rowling. Imagine if people like Albert Einstein and Susan B. Anthony didn't shape the world as it is now. Imagine if this world was plain. There was no books, no reading, no literature, no songs. The person who taught me this was J.K. Rowling. You might be wondering, why am I talking about her? All she did is make a bunch of books. Well, according to H history, 7 or 8 years ago, her marriage ended. She was poor, jobless, and struggling with depression as a single mother. But she still wanted to help people. So she tried her best, and she got the job. A job at the Human Rights Organization Amnesty International in London. But she didn't know how hard it would truly be. While she was there, she wrote hastily scribbled letters. She saw testimonies of people in whom been tortured their whole lives and photos of their injuries. She saw photos of missing people given by desperate families and friends, and much more. But when I was watching her Harvard speech, she remembered this one person, a person that she will never forget, and I won't either. He was an African torture victim, and he is covered in bruises and scars all over his body, and he was shaking. When he walked up to her, he smiled and he grabbed her hand and hoped her a future of happiness. But it wasn't all happy. This lady had to bring him to a room, and what she said is, I had to pause a minute and think about it. When he went in that room and sat down, the lady had to tell him that his mother has been executed because he was rebelling against his government. I just thought about how I would feel if my mother was executed for something that I thought was right. It was so sad. I almost started crying myself. J.K. Rowling did so much. She helped encourage, and she helped encourage, and she inspired people. She will always have a place in my heart. And just as she said, imagination is unique to humans. So use it wisely before it's too late. Done.
Hi, my name is Aiden Nguyen, and my TEDx speech is on Jackie Hayes. Jackie Hayes was a professional baseball player. He wasn't one of the best, but he wasn't one of the worst. Jackie played second base. He was on 2 teams in his career, the Washington Senators and the Chicago White Sox. Jackie had a love for baseball and one day faced a choice of giving up his love because of an unfortunate incident. Jackie was in the shower after a game against the A's. He thought he had got soap in his eyes because he felt it burning. He washed it out and thought nothing more of it. The next day, at the start of his game in Arizona, he covered up his left eye and noticed that looking at the jerseys on the back, the jerseys were blurry. He played that game and the next morning woke up seeing black rain on the ceiling. He went to a doctor in Arizona who then sent him back to Chicago. By August of that year, Jackie was completely blind in his right eye. According to SABR.org, after being examined, it was determined that Jackie was hit in the eye with a piece of cinder, which is a burning piece of wood or coal. Jackie did not want to give up the rest of his baseball career because of what happened, so he created what they could believe was the first helmet in baseball. It was a piece of metal on top of his head with two ear pieces over the ears. People say they looked more like headphones compared to the helmets that are used today. His first game after losing his right eyesight, he went up to bat and made a hit. The coaches joked around with him, saying that he batted better blind. Jackie finished his 18 games left in the season and retired. Jackie ended up going blind in his left eye as well 4 years later. Jackie relied on his wife and service dogs to help him. Jackie didn't allow his disabilities to stop his life. Soon after going completely blind, Jackie became the tax collector of Childen County of Central Alabama. His wife helped him run the collector's office for 12 years before they retired for good. Jackie and his wife had a great life together and even adopted a son. The singer may have ended his career, but it didn't stop him from being a success. Thank you.
My name is Jaden Wilson, and my topic is on Alexander Hamilton. I am not throwing away my shot. These are the strong words of Alexander Hamilton from his Broadway show. Alexander Hamilton had many triumphs, but he also had some tragedies. From a young age, his father left and his mother died when he was just 11. How would you feel becoming an orphan because of these tragic moments? Because of this, Alexander Hamilton was motivated to join the Revolutionary War to prove that orphans were worth more than anyone ever thought. Alexander Hamilton was very successful in the Revolutionary War, and because of this, he was able to become a major general, siding with the great George Washington, Marquis Lafayette, and Hercules Mulligan. Together, they were able to give freedom to French and made the U.S. its own country. They were also able to get some land back from Great Britain. After this, Alexander Hamilton went back to study law and made the Federalist Papers. These papers were 85 essays that proposed the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. Alexander Hamilton wrote a whopping 51 out of 85 of these essays. How would you feel writing 51 essays while you had two other people doing it with you, John Jay and John Adams, and they only wrote 32 together? That's incredible. He was also the founder of the Coast Guards and the New York Post. Unfortunately, Alexander Hamilton was never able to run for president because of scandals with John Adams' wife. Alexander Hamilton was able to be the first treasury of funds for the United States for George Washington. Unfortunately, Alexander Hamilton's son died soon after, right after he graduated from King's College, now known as Columbia University. His son died in a duel, unfortunately, just like Alexander Hamilton. According to Washington Post, he died 214 years ago from a gunshot wound. The bullet came from Vice President Aaron Burr, a member of his political party who challenged the revolutionary hero to the duel. Aaron Burr was one of his closest friends and his first friends. That must have been such a tragical moment, having your first friend kill you. I could never imagine that happening. Thank you for your time, and this was Alexander Hamilton.
My name is Samantha Alexander, and I'm doing Dave Peltzer. According to the Webster's Dictionary, a tragedy is an event causing great suffering, destruction, and distress. I think then we can all agree that child abuse is a tragedy. A tragedy, in fact, that impacts over 4 million children each year. Child abuse, though, is not a topic people like to talk about. KidsAtRisk.org states that child abuse is reported every 10 seconds, so it's a topic that can't be ignored. Dave Peltzer knows this tragedy far too well. In fact, his case of child abuse is the worst case in all California history. Yet, his story shows one child's courage to survive. Dave Peltzer was born on December 29, 1960. The first 3 years of his life were relatively normal and happy. By the time he was 4 years old, though, his normal forever changed. When he was in first grade, his mom began abusing him. Some abuse he suffered that year included breaking his arm, banning him from TV, and jamming soap in his mouth. Can you imagine? By the time he was in fourth grade, his mother's abusive tactics increased, and she only referred to him as it. This abuse continued daily until he was rescued. Through the courageous efforts of teachers, the principal, and the school nurse, David finally got a chance at success. He got rescued when he was 12 years old and weighed only 68 pounds. Even with all that against him, Dave was determined to keep on going. In 1995, he wrote a book called A Child Called It. It was listed on the New York Times bestseller list for several years, and in 5 years, he had sold at least 1.6 million copies. In spite of this terrible beginning, he managed to use his faith, positive attitude, and determination to survive. As a survivor, his message is about resilience, courage, and forgiveness. Webster Dictionary defines a triumph as a great victory or achievement. Dave Peltzer's story is certainly one of tragedy to triumph. He was rescued, and in his rescue, he was able to rise above his circumstances and succeed. Yes, Dave's story reminds us that the human spirit can triumph and survive. His triumph over tragedy encourages us to overcome any challenge. As I close, I would like to ask you to consider how you might help someone else around you rise above their tragedy to enjoy a life of triumph.
My name is Addie Brooks, and I'm talking about Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was a civil rights icon. She lived in Montgomery, Alabama, and was African American. In the year of 1955, Rosa was on her way home from work and was told to give up her seat to a few white people. Rosa refused, and the bus driver called the police. Rosa was arrested. Why was she arrested? Isn't America a free country? Well, America is a free country, but back then, things were not fair. According to Montgomery City Code, Chapter 6, Section 11, as an African American, Rosa was required to give up her seat near the front of the bus and move to the back of the bus. In the article, Rosa Parks' biography, Civil Rights Activist, 1913 through 2005, it says, Rosa recalled that her refusal wasn't because she was physically tired, but that she was tired of giving in. Well, the tragedy in this story was Rosa Parks being arrested. But the triumphant part is that Rosa became a civil rights icon. Rosa inspires me because she was a rebel. Rosa was a rule breaker that stood up for what was right because the rules were unjust. The NAACP was able to organize a bus boycott because of Rosa's arrest. The NAACP means National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The bus boycott led to the creation of the Montgomery Improvement Association, the MIA. The MIA elected Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as their leader. The boycott lasted 381 days. No one included in the boycott took the bus. Many people were arrested during this boycott. An estimated amount of 40,000 people walked to work. Some had to walk 20 miles to get to work. Because of Rosa's arrest and the boycott, the Alabama court and the Supreme Court ruled that segregation was unconstitutional, and which was a huge victory for the civil rights movement. That's all.
Hi, I'm Gianna Cola, and I will be talking about Harriet Tubman. Everybody here has heard of slavery, but have you really thought hard about what life was really like for slaves? Have you? Well, today I'm going to be talking about someone who not only suffered as a slave, but who became famous for leading slaves to freedom. I will be talking about Harriet Tubman, and she was born in Maryland. She was a slave. She was born into a slave and had to work when she was very young. When she got a little older, she was forced to work in the fields. She was beaten and threatened a lot, and this is an example of a slave with years worth of beaten and beaten. Harriet Tubman was the most famous conductor of the Underground Railroad. At first, I thought the Underground Railroad was a real road, but after all this research, I realized the Underground Railroad was a secret network that black and white people used to help slaves escape. And what they would do is they would give slaves shelter and aid to help them get through to the South. Slavery went on for many, many years, but ended during the Civil War. Slavery became illegal in 1865 everywhere in the USA, and Harriet Tubman helped that happen. Was one of the reasons why that happened. I found most of my information on history.com. As you can see, Harriet Tubman went through horrible tragedies in her life, but what made her so inspiring was her ability to overcome that tragedy by helping herself and so many other people. And we celebrate her triumph as a nation to this day. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jordan Thomas. I'll be doing Johnny Erickson talk. Stop for a moment. Imagine your life without the use of your legs. But wait, let's go farther. Now imagine your life without the use of your legs or arms. Seems like a tragedy, doesn't it? Well, that's not the case for Johnny Erickson Tata. She was able to overcome her tragedy and create a life of triumph. Johnny Erickson Tata was born in Baltimore, Maryland on October 15, 1948. As a young girl, she enjoyed riding horses, drawing, and swimming. But on July 30th, this all changed. At 17 years old, she dove into the shallow part of Chesapeake Bay and was paralyzed from the neck down. The doctors told her she severed her spinal cord and would never be able to use her legs and arms again. As you might imagine, at first, Johnny was angry, depressed, and suicidal. Think about it. No legs or arms for the rest of your life. How would you feel? While Johnny spent the next 2 years in rehabilitation, she learned how to paint with a brush in between her teeth. Now she has over 150 paintings, drawings, and sketches that have all been created by her mouth. In 1979, 12 years after her tragedy, Johnny began an organization called Johnny and Friends. Her organization delivers wheelchairs around the world. That's a lot for someone with no legs or arms, don't you think? Johnny Erickson Tata has been able to take what could be a tragedy and has dedicated her life to helping disabled people in need. Now that's triumph. Hi, my name is Akash Patel. Today I'm going to talk about the tragedies and triumphs of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. Let me ask you a question.
Do you know of the two men who change a whole world of slavery for good? I will tell you. It's Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. They went through various tragedies, but they overcame them with triumphs. But it was not easy. Abraham Lincoln, for example, a tragedy for him was the Civil War. When the north part of the nation did not want slavery and the south part wanted slavery, this resulted in a civil war and started to break apart the United States. Lincoln didn't want this, so that was a tragedy. On the other hand, Frederick Douglass, he learned to read and write as a slave child, but he found out that he needed to teach other slaves to do the same. So he started a school and taught other slaves how to read and write, and he said this was going to help them escape. Unfortunately, this was stopped because it was against the law, and this was tragic for him. So as you can see, Lincoln and Douglass were being stopped from abolishing slavery, which was their goal to get, but they overcame these tragedies with some triumphs. When Lincoln was elected the President of the United States, he found that the Civil War was a way to end slavery. So he signed a paper called the Emancipation Proclamation, abolishing slavery forever, and this was a triumph for him. Now Frederick Douglass, he found out that when he taught slaves, he was able to speak at speeches. So when he grew up, he spoke at speeches to convince people to hate slavery, which led to the abolition of it because more people wanted to abolish it. So as a result of this, Frederick and Lincoln both abolished slavery, which is their final goal, which they always wanted. This was a major triumph. So now you have seen how these two men have overcome the tragedies with triumphs, which helped them and other people in their lives. So I request you to do the same. You should try to overcome your tragedies and triumphs. Don't be scared of doing this. It will help you and others in your life. The end.
Hi, I'm Carlos Zakovich. Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass both had monumental lives. Their lives had many triumphs, but those achievements sadly came with many tragedies. President Lincoln and Mr. Douglass are, and always will be, remembered. Abraham Lincoln's tragedies and triumphs defined him as a leader. It all started on November 6, 1860, when he was elected President of the United States. In the fourth paragraph of From Log Cabin to the White House, the text states, their second son Willie died of fever in February 1862. Abraham Lincoln and his wife Mary fell into deep despair after that tragic event. 7 months later, the Union lost the Second Battle of Bull. This is stated in paragraph 5. This was a tragedy for the Union Army, which is the side Lincoln was on. Almost a year later, the summer of 1863 brought victory to the Union Army. In paragraph 7, the text states, this was a turning point in the war. Delivering the Gettysburg Address was an outstanding accomplishment for Mr. Lincoln. Not that many other people have been able to give such a life-changing speech. President Lincoln's life had devastating moments, both those scarring times, glorious and happy times came. Frederick Douglass lived part of his life as a slave. This brought horrific tragedies and almost impossible triumphs. Forever free, in paragraph 1, the text states, when he was 8 years old, Frederick was sent to work as a houseboy for some of his owner's relatives. Sophia Auld taught Frederick how to read. Learning to read was an enormous accomplishment for him since slave owners don't teach their slaves how to read. In paragraph 4, the text states at 15 he was sent to work as a field hand on a farm for a man named Edward Cody. This was a horrible challenge for Frederick since for slaves, city life was lovely compared to the country. Years later, Frederick escaped. In paragraph 5, the text states dressed in a sailor's uniform and carrying a freedman's passport. This is how Mr. Douglas was dressed during his escape. After tragedies and triumphs, Frederick Douglass, a leader for many, was free. To sum it up, Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln were both leaders. Along the way, they both had their triumphs and tragedies, but in their own ways. Frederick Douglass had challenges and achievements during slavery, while President Lincoln had them during presidency. Mr. Douglass and Mr. Lincoln were big leaders for slaves during their time. Yet even with being leaders, challenges and amazing things came along the way. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Logan Woods, and I did my presentation on my aunt who has AML, which is a acute myeloid leukemia, which is, I think, a common disease. Before she had leukemia, she was retired at the age of 62, yet she was still very active. What she liked to do was she liked to hike, kayak, mountain climb, volunteer at literacy programs, and also do a lot of photography. When she was diagnosed, she knew that she was very tired, dizzy, and weak. When she had gone for her annual physical, they noticed that her WC was low, which is her white blood cells. So they did more tests, and then she was diagnosed with the AML. When she had chemo, she was at the hospital for many weeks at a time, and her emotions changed to stressful and fearful. But yet she still had many people to help her go through it. Her husband, sister, brother, my cousins, and me helped her get through it. When she was kept on vomiting and when she was very tired, she knew she was not getting better. When she had her bone marrow transplant, her name came up on the list, and they had a 100% match, which is unusual. Normally, you would have a 97, 96% match. She got her donor from a young woman in Northern Europe, and when she got it, she was in the hospital for over a month, and then they killed all her blood cells, so they gave her donor cells. She remained in a sterile environment since she was still waiting for the bone marrow to take over, and so her house was clean to mimic the sterile environment, and she also wore gloves and masks for about a year, and she was also reimmunized like a baby would be at the end of the year. Her life now was like her life before, yet she continues with frequent checkups. She is also headed back to walking, mountain climbing, skiing, kayaking, and photography. She is also starting to volunteer again. It has been 3 whole years, and she is looking for a fulfilling life.
My name is Ellie Reese, and my topic today is Bethany Hamilton. Have you ever gone to the beach on a regular sunny day? Well, probably you have. But have you ever gone to the beach on that regular sunny day and had your arm ripped right off of you? I can go ahead and answer this for you now. No, you've not. But you know who has? Bethany Hamilton. Bethany Hamilton is a phenomenal surfer. But you know what makes her stand out? The fact that she only has one arm. She changed her life as a 13-year-old on October 31st, 2003. But even after devastation, she still got back up to surf. Bethany Hamilton is a great surfer. Before her tragedy, she still had lots and lots of success. At the age of 10, she acquired her first sponsor, Rip Curl. And even before that, she was successfully surfing at the age of 6, says the book Soul Surfer. Learning to surf was in her blood after all. Surfing came by naturally for Bethany's parents. But the time that her career really started was in 2000. That's when she won her first big surfing competition at the age of 10. And even after that, she kept surfing and surfing, and with her skill, winning and winning. Most people think of Bethany Hamilton as shark lady. Earlier in this speech, when I said Bethany's life changed, it changed by a shark. On Halloween of 2003, a 14-foot-long tiger shark attacked Bethany.
Not only did it take a huge chunk of her new Rip Curl surfboard with it, but also all of Bethany's left arm. She, after the attack, had to swim a quarter of a mile back to shore just to wait another 2 hours before she could get to the hospital. While in the recovery room after surgery, she stated, "I'm going to be a surf photographer." She planned on giving up surfing. But even after that statement, she wasn't sold entirely on the idea. She easily changed her mind to do what she loved. Courage doesn't mean you don't get afraid. Courage means you don't let your fears stop you. That is a very well-known quote by Bethany Hamilton. And when it comes to her, every word of it is true. There are obviously more sharks in the ocean, but she still surfs. And again, obviously, she doesn't like sharks, but she still surfs. She overcame her fears and uses God to guide her along the way. In 2005, she won the Best Comeback Athlete Award at the age of 15. I mean, how often does that really happen? And according to Wikipedia, she has a husband, Adam, and 2 kids, Wesley and Tobias. This shows that even after her accident, she can still live a perfectly normal life. To finish off how successful she was, here's another quote. "God created the heavens and the earth and the oceans and the waves for our enjoyment. Surfing is just my way of worshiping him." So, as you can see, Bethany Hamilton has had many times of triumph and sometimes of tragedy. But even after the devastation of losing an arm, she still faced her fears and got back up to surf.